Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Activist Lawyer. I am delighted to be joined in the studio today by Emma Mcllveen. Emma, thank you for coming.
Hi Sarah, it's great to be in Newry today. Bit of a change from Ballymena direction.
Absolutely, and we're delighted again to have you in the studio. A lot of our episodes recently have been done via Zoom or via phone call, which is great and fine, and we appreciate that people can't be here, but it's so great to have you present here today. So just a little bit of background about Emma. So Emma is a barrister who primarily specialises in employment law. She has a special interest in pregnancy discrimination and vulnerable claimants. Prior to qualifying as a barrister, Emma was a Kennedy Scholar at Harvard University. She now publishes a monthly employment law newsletter known as McIlveen on Employment and was a co-founder of the Advanced Employment course at the Institute for Professional Legal Studies. In 2021, she was shortlisted for a Next 100 Years Inspirational Women in Law Award and recently completed a global leadership programme delivered by Cambridge University. Alongside her employment practice, she is very interested in medical legal issues, and as a result, she currently serves on the committee of the Medical Legal Society in Northern Ireland and is appointed to NIPEC as a non-executive lay member. Outside of the bar, she is a mother of three, which we spoke about a lot earlier, and is passionate about country music. Woohoo! We have a lot in common, Emma. Mother of three and country music, reflexology and breastfeeding. Emma, thank you so much again for coming.
No problem.
So we had a little chat earlier before we come on here, but just if you could take our listeners through, I guess, your career journey, how you ended up practicing in the area that you practice in, and a little bit of your background.
Yes. So I suppose where do I start? It's been some journey to get to here, and it's still continuing as I go through this. So where did I start? Where did I come from? So I'm from Ballymena direction, and I had no family connections in law, and really before I got into the process of qualifying, my experience of law was literally from what you watched on TV or just generally within society.
Yeah.
And you had asked me, Sarah, in advance, what made you get into law? Where did that come from? And the first thing that came to mind was a history teacher actually in school. And I always loved history. I always loved to argue. And he was the one that said to me, why don't you consider it a career in law? So I went to Ballymena Academy and they facilitated work experience. And my first work experience was actually in criminal law. It was a murder trial. And I was just absolutely fascinated by it. And that was the start of my journey in terms of how I got into it. Now obviously I've came a long way. I don't practice criminal now, and I've ended up in an employment law practice primarily. And where did that come from? Well, I suppose at the institute, by the time I got there, I really enjoyed the employment course and also my master primarily practicing that. So through pupillage and seeing her in action and being out and learning under her, I really developed a love of employment law, and I've now ended up going into it myself and establishing a practice in that area.
Fantastic. And you can really see that you have developed a love in it because you kind of go beyond, I suppose, what we would traditionally see as a barrister and what that profession entails with your, I think it started as a blog, did you say? And now it's your newsletter that you send through, and we receive it, and it's very, very informative. But you're also very interested in education and that piece, training and providing kind of additional resources to companies or people interested in getting in the area. How do you balance that part of your work with your actual caseload and representing, your clients and taking instructions from solicitors in specific matters? It must be difficult.
Well, I suppose where that journey started, actually COVID had a lot to do with it, ironically. So I would say that there have been silver linings, which have come out of COVID for me. I've always been interested in the education side of things. When I was on pupillage and in my early years at the bar, I was a tutor at Queen's, and I loved getting back to Queen's to tutor people in law, and I loved that engagement. And really in Northern Ireland, when COVID hit, our tribunals effectively shut their doors while they kind of navigated the pandemic and decided what way we were going to move forward. And at the time I thought, what am I going to do? You know, I'm not going to be in the tribunal as I once was. So it gave me time and space to really think about, you know, what, you know, I'm doing, how can I like contribute and move forward. And really it started off as a way to keep me sane during the pandemic when the tribunals were closed. Yeah. And that was where I had initially thought about publishing an employment law book for Northern Ireland, but whenever I explored that, and because of COVID and the fast-changing nature of this area, I thought by the time I publish a book, this is going to be out of date. So just during the pandemic when I was locked down, I was like, well, do you want to know what? I will start to write bits and pieces on LinkedIn about recent cases and issues that were arising that as employment lawyers we had never been asked before. And I know I had watched other chambers in England such as Cloisters and they had published various guides on topical issues that were arising, and a lot of these issues were impacting women. You know, how do employers navigate pregnant women in the workplace and how do they manage that risk of COVID? So there were really interesting issues and I really just took an interest in that, and then I started to publish my own employment law newsletter where I combined interesting cases from GB, NI and ROI, because I'm qualified now across both. And Brilliant. I thought I use it to kind of develop my knowledge, and I thought, well, I love this, I'm gathering it and doing it anyway, so I might as well share it, the resource to others, and it has proved very beneficial.
Absolutely, it's a fantastic resource. And sometimes maybe I'm not, I mean, employment law, some people who, you know, have been considering going into that can maybe see it as a bit dry or, you know, a bit procedural. But really when we read through your newsletter and other people who are sharing it, we'd Mary Kitson on here that was talking about some really interesting cases that came before the Commission in Northern Ireland around discrimination, etc. I mean, it's, I suppose you're starting to shine a light on issues that, as you said, weren't really highlighted before. And clients themselves are coming out. You know, before I think there was a lot of anonymity. We didn't really know much about cases around discrimination being brought to the fore, but it seems to be a lot more high profile now. Is that something that you're seeing in terms of issues affecting women in particular in the workplace?
Yeah, and I think topically, because there is an interaction, my background as well, my degree in Queen's, I did it in law and politics. Okay. And I think a lot of these issues, you see the overlap between legally what's happening in terms of how the case law is developing, but also politically in terms of how women and organisations are pushing for change in certain areas. So for example, like Employers for Childcare in Northern Ireland have done great work in terms of lobbying for more access to childcare support for women. And then I think of the likes of who you see on Twitter, the founder of Pregnant Then Screwed.
Fantastic, yeah.
She's done a lot on, and I think she's
lobbying,
recently published a book on the motherhood penalty. So there's a lot of like positive things that are being done in terms of highlighting discrimination issues for women within the workplace, and trying to make change. And like she has various petitions which she shares about trying to increase the time limit from 3 months to 6 months to give people that are potentially facing pregnancy discrimination more time to seek legal advice and consider whether they have a case to take forward. Because you know yourself, Sarah, as a mother of three, you know, it is a lot to try to balance motherhood with work. And if you find yourself in a position where you're facing a challenging situation in work and you're in the middle of trying to navigate life with a newborn and breastfeeding and everything else that comes with it, it's very challenging. It's
very challenging, and I suppose that leads me on to our next discussion about that. And both mothers of three, we've discovered that. And I mean, that whole concept around trying to achieve a work-life balance. I mean, how do you find that in practice? I mean, you've a very young baby. What's your wee baby?
Matilda's 10 months, 10 months. Now. Wow. But I have 3 under 3.
3 under 3, mother of 3. Well, I can say that is, I don't know how you manage that, but you were talking there about during COVID having a bit of time and space, I guess, to reflect on things, and then, you know, out of that came your newsletter and other avenues. How do you find time and space to balance? Because you're back at work now, pretty much full on, aren't you? And
yeah.
how does it work for you?
So I think I have to acknowledge that at times it feels like there's no balance, and there's a lot of juggling of plates. And we had discussed this morning, Sarah, that the importance of a support team around you, and it really does take a village to raise kids. And I couldn't do what I do without the support of my husband primarily and others in the background. And what I was saying is that a lot of these issues, it's not just a female issue. And I think in 2022 you see fathers that are wanting to be more engaged and co-parent. And we really, I feel, as women need that support. And I certainly do in order to do what I do. And I am grateful. And I suppose this links back to employment and flexibility, to the support that my husband's employer has shown. He has been very flexible, and I shared a story with you this morning pre-COVID, a time where I was called into court for an urgent review, and we had no childcare arranged that morning, and Ben literally had to take Annie, and the receptionist in his work minded her while I did the urgent review in court and rushed back across the street to collect Annie. From his place of work. So, that's the reality behind the scenes at times in terms of what it takes to balance being a mother at the bar and all the other responsibilities that go with it. But then on the other end, because of the flexibility that goes with self-employment, on the weeks that you've no substantive hearings, there is a bit more flexibility to come to Newry to speak with you or work on my employment law newsletter. And that's why the area of employment, I really enjoy it. I find it really works for family life because generally substantive hearings will generally start at 10, finish at 4, and there's a lot of advisory opinion writing that I can do outside. And I can do in the evenings whenever the kids are in bed. So I really feel I've found an area that works for me. I love it. I enjoy it. And you can, although at times tough, you can make it work and you can balance it.
And I wonder, has COVID, because we changed our whole routines and schedules to work through that, balancing children and ongoing work from home. And do you think, though, the workplace in general has become more responsive to flexibility and to changing our kind of old habits and the kind of more rigid structures around work? I mean, 9 to 5 in most areas just doesn't seem to be workable anymore. Have you noticed that in terms of the clients or the interactions you're having with others who might seek your advice in employment law? Is flexibility something that we're seeing a lot more of in respect of all employees, not just mothers or parents?
Yeah, I think it's a catch-22. So I think virtual working has enabled workplaces generally to be more flexible, i.e. we don't all have to be in a physical location or be in the same place to be able to do our jobs anymore. We can connect virtually, and that has its pros and cons.
Sure.
Because yes, it's more flexible in the sense that you can be wherever, you can join on, but I think a key issue is the boundary. Because we're no longer 9 to 5, I feel like work blurs with family life at times, and it's managing, I think, expectations of employees and clients from our end as well, because I think across the board employers are generally more open to try to work more flexibly, but it's trying to manage that and make that work for business as well. So there's pros and cons to it.
There are. I can see that, and even it falls on you to become more of a manager of your own time as an individual and making sure that you're not overworking too, which can be easily done, after the kids go to bed. Well, I'm going to just check in here a few emails that I wasn't able to get to today, and you could find yourself there in the evening, maybe 2 or 3 hours later, still sitting there, which, at the odd time, fine, but I think you just need to really watch that and try and make sure you switch off and take a step back and realise how many hours you are working. And, I guess won't work for every industry or whatever, but if it does, I suppose it's good that employers are willing to embrace some level of flexibility now going forward.
And we do see on that, like even in Northern Ireland, some firms have been embracing the 4-day working week. So I think it has started conversations about new ways of working, and people are trying at least different ways and trying to find what works for them and their business.
Absolutely, and that's I've seen it, a few of I think the Pregnant and Screwed campaign, some of the people involved in that have been exploring this, the 4-day week, and Maurice Hutchinson, who had been on from JMK, explained to us previously in an episode how that's been working for them in the legal industry. So lots of ideas coming up. And also this week we are recording today's episode on it's the day after International Women's Day 2022. I think the hashtag is Break the Bias. And so many matters affecting women and girls, you know, around the world now, and we're also celebrating achievements and people who have broken barriers, you know, to become successful and to become leaders in their industries. But just could we talk a little bit about what issues still arise for women within employment? What barriers are women still facing, if any, you know? So maybe you could take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this question, I kind of had 3 kind of key areas that come up for me that we see regularly. So firstly, sex discrimination generally. So that would involve less favourable treatment in the workplace on the basis of being female in comparison to male colleagues. So this can come up on things like less favourable treatment in terms of pay, benefits, promotion, roles, and even sexism, and remarks that are made. I know there was a case recently that made the headlines in Northern Ireland. I'm sure people have come across it, the case of Brona Murray. And I was reading the press release on that, and she brought a sex discrimination claim, and one of the comments that was made to her, she was described as a cougar. So you do still see sexism like that within workplaces, and claims being brought as a result of comments like that being made. Secondly, pregnancy discrimination. There are still a lot of issues around that in terms of how employees navigate maternity leave, like right from the start of pregnancy. So how do they manage feeling sick at the beginning, and people that maybe suffer from sickness throughout their pregnancy, and trying to manage that with their responsibilities in the workplace, taking time out to attend scans, etc., and then actually going off and, you know, going down to statutory maternity, and then navigating the return back, and maybe coming back to find that the role doesn't quite look like what it once did prior to them going off. And even, as you know yourself, it's not easy becoming a mother in that transition, and people, you know, can find themselves suffering from postnatal depression. And dealing with all that and the emotions that come can result in, you know, situations where women do face discrimination. Thirdly, a big one, equal pay. And this does go on, and there are cases pending. Now, equal pay cases are complex, they're costly, they take a long time to pursue, but there are equal pay issues, and that's really where, because I think there's confusion at times as to, well, what is equal pay? Is it the same as the, you know, the gender pay disparity stuff that you would see a lot of material being produced on? But equal pay, when it comes to law, is where a woman is pointing to a man and saying, I do similar or like work of equal value to that man, and I'm not getting paid the same. And I think culturally in Northern Ireland, it's quite uncomfortable at times for women to talk about money and to talk about the salary that they receive or benefits they receive. So that is an issue. There are cases, and culturally, a lot of these issues, it's not just about issues within the profession. It goes to the wider issues that women face in society in general, and I think that's been highlighted by the events that the Bar and the Law Society have held this week for International Women's Day.
And just touching on that again within our industry and within law, I mean, do you think that women tend to practice within certain areas, or are kind of maybe forced into practice within certain areas, that they may not really see career progression as much as they would if they were in something like, I don't know, corporate, something more corporate? Or is that still a thing? Because, you know, it certainly was when I started off in practice. I don't know whether you can see that within the bar or, you know, within your fellow practitioners in law.
I think at times there is a perception that still exists that women should practice in certain areas, and the key go-to ones that you always hear is, oh, women should practice in family law. I do think, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's some people that really enjoy family law, and that's for them, and they go into it. I do think it is changing across the board, and you do see women, practice in different areas such as commercial law, employment law, immigration, and there is more of a diversity. But whenever you go into the commercial courts at times, or civil courts, there's at times, depending on where you are, less women in them areas than what you would see if you went into a court that practiced family, for example.
Interesting, isn't it? So the other thing, you mentioned one of the campaigns there in the UK. So you do see a lot of press, and I have seen a lot of petitions come my way just around improving, the work and life for pregnant women in the workplace. And I think that's a really important topic just to stick to as well. And I know you mentioned it there as one of the issues that still affect women in work. But just, I suppose, on a practical level, what should pregnant women know when it comes to employment in the workplace?
Well, Northern Ireland specifically, so I made a wee list of things that I thought would be useful for people to know, and outside employment law they might not be aware of. So firstly, what I would say is that there are major differences between the employment laws in Northern Ireland and GB. So if you Google pregnancy discrimination, you tend to get a lot of articles that exist online that refer to the Equality Act.
Okay.
So the Equality Act does not apply to Northern Ireland, and we have separate pieces of legislation that apply to us. So technically we might have the same rights, but they're just under different banners of things. So it's important, if you are looking on Google, that you are looking at the right resource for your jurisdiction. So the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland has great guides on everything you need to know about pregnancy discrimination or maternity discrimination. So I would really highlight that as a good starting point. Also, in terms of practical tips that people may not be aware of, I would say that pregnant employees have the right to be paid for antenatal appointments. Not everybody's aware of that, and maybe think, I have to take annual leave or something. But you actually have a right to be paid, and if you're not, you can bring a claim in that regard. Also, for employers, a key thing to think about is conducting risk assessments for their pregnant employees, and this has been a big one throughout COVID, because as far as I'm aware, within the health service, because obviously that's a unique context where, arguably, if you're a nurse working in a hospital, for example, you've more chance of being exposed to COVID, so they have to think very carefully about how they protect women in that position. And as far as I understand it, I know up until recently anyway, they were going off at the 28-week mark. And I'm not saying that's the blanket position across the board, and there are, depending on the nature of your workplace, there's ways and means to be able to facilitate a pregnant woman to work beyond that safely, but it's something that employers should be turning their mind to in risk assessments. Also, your holiday entitlement legally accrues during your maternity. So
very important.
Very important. Also, because we think a lot in employment tribunals about employees and their rights, but increasingly we're seeing women work in different types of environments. So we see more kind of women working, example is virtual assistants or setting up their own businesses off the back of COVID, and perhaps they're self-employed. And people, I think across the board, maybe aren't always aware that if you are self-employed, there's no entitlement to statutory maternity pay, because obviously you're not employed, but there is a benefit called statutory maternity allowance, which self-employed people can apply for. So as a barrister, for example, during my maternity leaves, I was entitled to statutory maternity allowance, and it pays you the same as what you would get in your statutory maternity, and you're also allowed the 10 keeping in touch days as well, so that's important to note. You don't necessarily have to be an employee to be discriminated against. So, for example, a key case in that regard was one taken by the Equality Commission on behalf of Laura Graziti. and she was a seasonal worker, and she was able to benefit from the maternity protection. So just don't automatically think, oh, I'm not an employee, so I'm not entitled to protection. Always, seek advice if you are facing an unequal situation or less favourable treatment in the workplace. Yes, so I think that's a pretty good overview.
Absolutely.
Time limits as well. It is 3 months to bring a claim. So that would be 3 months from the date that you're dismissed.
Okay.
Or 3 months from the last act of discrimination. So it is...
it's very short, isn't it?
It is short.
Yeah.
So, and as I said through this podcast, when you have so much going on and navigating a newborn, if you're facing this kind of situation, it's important that you seek advice and specialist employment advice from a solicitor.
Absolutely.
As you go through it, or even when you're trying to navigate it in the workplace and you're maybe thinking about raising a grievance or trying to address it informally, it does no harm to have a chat with the solicitor in the first instance that can kind of highlight your rights and entitlements so that you're aware, because as a barrister, we're always brought in when you're at the door of the tribunal, and then we sit down and we look over, well, what happened at the grievance meeting? What happened at the grievance appeal? Did you raise this at the time? And there's all these questions that we're obviously coming and looking at with hindsight, whereas in some cases, if people had gone and sought advice at the time, they may not have ended up at the tribunal stage.
Fab advice and really, really great tips there. Just, I suppose, on another note, you were recently nominated for an Inspirational Women in Law Award by Next 100 Years.
Yes, that's
congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I should also highlight Jenny Moore from Northern Ireland. Actually received. I was shortlisted, but Jenny received
the award from Northern Ireland. Wow, brilliant.
For her initiatives around diversity. I think with Danske Bank, off the top of my head, I think that's who she works with. So just a shout out to her, and it's a testament to the kind of initiatives that are going on in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely, that's fantastic.
And there's some really positive examples of positive action happening. So it's not all negative.
It's not all negative. We were chatting about that earlier, myself and we were like, we should highlight some really good news stories as well, because there's a lot happening in Northern Ireland at the moment too, in terms of bills progressing and stuff that's been on the table for a very long time, finally starting to move through in the midst of everything going on. So not just in employment, in other areas too. But on that, I suppose, this is a recognition of women in law in particular and the achievements that women make in this profession. But we're kind of touching this a little bit, but just in general, do you think that women working in this profession do experience barriers when it comes to career progression? I'm thinking maybe, not just women with children, but how do you view that, or do you think we've kind of moved on from that?
No, so I think on this question, it's firstly very important to recognise that we've come a long way. And in Northern Ireland in recent years, we now have our first lady Chief Justice.
Yes.
We have a female Justice Minister.
Fantastic.
We have a female that's ahead of the Law Society, and that was showcased by the Law Society's event this week. So that is great to see, but notwithstanding that, there still are challenges, and from my perspective, the key challenges would be women feeling pigeonholed into certain areas, the fact that female counsel, there has been research done in England that came out a few weeks ago to say that the research is showing that female counsel are generally paid less than their male counterparts across the board. There's also challenges navigating maternity leave, for female barristers particularly, and it's given the setup and the fact that we're self-employed, and regardless of what profession you're in, it's always challenging. And a few of my friends, for example, are hairdressers, and they're generally self-employed, and they also felt similar pressures to return to work, because it's not easy to survive on statutory maternity allowance and feed 3 children. So there's always, I think, a pressure to return and get back, and a major one for the bar would be the issue of female retention. And this has been an issue, you know, for quite a number of years, and there are, you know, strategies and actions ongoing to address that, but it doesn't seem to be an issue with females coming in.
Okay.
Like at the Institute, for example, there's plenty of female barristers coming in. It's generally 50-50.
Okay.
But it's the retention.
Yeah.
And it's when you get to the stage where you're maybe considering having a family, and there's research ongoing in that regard in terms of the reasons as to why people feel it's generally seems to be 5 years and up that it's difficult to navigate, and they, you know, potentially leave at that stage and go on to do something else, or to have more security in terms of an employed role.
It's so common, though it is. I mean, I know so many women who have faced that issue. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly, and it'll be interesting to see what the research leads to. Yeah, on that.
And there has been really positive action. I know from the bar, they now have a maternity policy, which I've availed of.
Okay.
And that's been very positive. So we get a break in our fees, you know, while we're off on maternity. And also, I was delighted that they have recently established a breastfeeding room in the bar library.
Brilliant.
Which is amazing. And like, even since I came to the bar in 2016, breastfeeding wasn't really talked about. And I know I've been quite open about my own breastfeeding journey on LinkedIn, and that's been very positive. And the amount of people that reach out to you and say, like, good on you, like, I'm trying to do this as well, and even starting that conversation is very powerful.
Absolutely.
And I kind of like reflect on my own personal journey from when I had Annie, because I was more junior at the bar at that time, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm too scared to say that I'm breastfeeding, or I need time, or I need a break during a hearing in order to pump. Whereas now with Matilda, I actually felt more confident in myself. And I think COVID's had an impact on that too. And with Matilda in some of my hearings, I was able to say to judges within the tribunal, both male and female, I'm recently returning from maternity leave, I'm breastfeeding, and as a reasonable adjustment for myself, as female counsel, would you mind if I have an extra 10 minutes on the lunch break to enable me to pump? And they were fab.
Brilliant.
And I actually managed to get my own room and fridge in the tribunal to allow me to do that, which is just amazing. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that. And I was in the tribunal the other week, and they actually have a purple poster on the wall now saying breastfeeding welcome here. And that actually, it nearly brought a tear to my eye, because I thought, as a result of me speaking out and speaking up about an issue that is so simple, you know, an extra 10 minutes for lunch, and really, you know, it doesn't, when you stand back and look at it, you know, it doesn't take a lot to, you know, make small changes which really have such a major impact.
Yeah, and to make it the norm. I mean, hopefully we see that throughout Northern Ireland and everywhere, that really encourages people not to be afraid. But I think just from everything we've spoken about today, that is so inspirational to anybody listening today. I mean, I didn't realise that, and I didn't realise those changes had been made, but I have followed you on LinkedIn, and I know you've shared your journey, but I think it's so important for people to do that. And it's also quite brave as well. I mean, not everybody's comfortable doing that, but you know that you're bringing other people along with you, and it's great that people have contacted you, women have contacted you about that, and hopefully that will be, you know, a reason for change. So, I mean, on that, I suppose you're very much does your work informed, I suppose, or your opinions or the type of employment law that you really want to highlight by your role as a mother and your experience with your children? Yeah,
I would say absolutely. Becoming a mother changes everything, and it's a major life transition, I would say, in itself. But I think since I've become a mother myself, I think I have more empathy with some of the issues that you see in these types of cases, and you can understand the need for additional breaks in order to pump or breastfeed, and how stressful that is. And I know pre-COVID, when we didn't have the virtual hearings, again with Annie, there was a time where I was on maternity and I was trying to come back for a keeping in touch day, and that was when the CMDs in them days were in person in Killymeal House.
Right.
And I had thought, oh, this is going to be relatively quick, it will take an hour. And I had my husband Ben. Hi Ben, if you're listening. He was in the Radisson Hotel with Annie because I was still breastfeeding her at that stage, and the hearing went on for longer than I expected. And like Ben was texting me saying like,
I'm feeling the anxiety.
Yeah, Annie's kicking off. She needs fed, and I'm thinking, no, like how much longer?
Yeah.
Can this go on for? Can we wrap this up? But actually, it was fine. And again, in that situation, I had the confidence to say, actually, Judge, I am returning from maternity. I'm breastfeeding. Would you mind if I took a break here for 10 minutes to sort Annie out and we can return? And there was understanding in that circumstance. And what I would highlight as well is the importance of understanding from male colleagues and male champions. And I have actually found my male counterparts have been more than understanding and accommodating. And if I find myself that, because obviously as your child, grows up, it's not as much of an issue now because, Matilda's not breastfeeding as much. But it's in them early days when you're trying to navigate and get feeding established that you need more of a leeway. And I think you can't use it and take the biscuit either, but in the right circumstance. And I think, if you're going to a judge and say, look, I need 10 minutes or I need to start slightly later. And I think as I, progress in the legal profession, I've become more confident in asking for small adjustments where necessary for myself. And as a result, this is not about me. This is about changing things for the better across the board and making it easier for females coming behind. And really, because even in coming to speak to you, Sarah, and being part of this, the word activism, it kind of scared me a bit.
I know. It scares me.
Because I was like, I don't see myself as an activist. Like, what does activism mean? And initially, like, I kind of, in my head, I see myself with a placard, like, protesting at something, and I'm like, no.
That's not me.
No, that's not me.
But,
but whenever you Google, like, what is activism, it's taking small steps in order to achieve change. And I think, like, some of the examples that we've talked about today, that, having the confidence to politely explain and ask a judge, look, can I have that time over lunch to enable me to breastfeed? That, I suppose, if I stand back and reflect on that, arguably is activism.
It is, absolutely. And the impact that can have going forward, and the fact that you're able to share that, and it is within your profession, it is within, our kind of legal profession, but it doesn't really matter where it is. The fact that, you're highlighting those small changes. I am sure people listening into this podcast, and particularly this part of the conversation, will really take note and think, wow, that is a small change to ask for. But as you said, it's not, it's where you see it's necessary to ask for a small adjustment. And I think that's it. But the impact that has potentially on women in general and in the workplace is quite significant.
And it's not just an issue within the legal profession.
No.
I think women are gaining more confidence at times as a result of COVID to ask for more flexibility.
Yes.
And I see that across the board with employers where women are maybe saying, okay, during lockdown, I proved that I can do my job remotely. I can work in a more flexible way. So going forward, could we look at me only coming into the office 2 days a week? I know my own mother, her pattern of working has completely changed as a result of COVID. She previously, pre-COVID, was in the office 5 days a week. Now they are in a position where they're going in maybe 2 or 3 days and working from home, and they're set up to do it the others. And it really makes a difference. And back to the issue of balance, like, on the days where I'm working remotely and I'm maybe on a virtual review or virtual consultation, like, you can throw on a wash at lunchtime. You can...
I love that. I'm sorry. I just feel so accomplished at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That I don't have to come home to all of that if it is a case that I've worked from home.
Yeah. Or you can like get the dinner started and prepared and ready. And I know our own personal setup, we have a daycare that's like 5 minutes away from our house. So like you see, not having to like drive into Belfast every day, sit in traffic, battle to get home, the stress of having to be there at the nursery on time, like that has been removed.
All the running. Yeah. The stress of that is unbelievable when especially when you're busy at work and trying to fit all of that in. But I think I agree with that is the balance that I like to achieve. It's not, you're never with, I mean, I'm wrecked today with teething babies. I feel very like out of sorts and not balanced at all. But what I like is, you know, the weeks where, yes, you're busy at work, but you're able to, you know, sort out some of your home stuff, you know, during the day, and it kind of leaves time for you in the evening then, you know, to spend with the kids and catch up on whatever it is you want to do to relax. So that is the balance that I'm certainly trying to achieve at the minute.
And even it's not even family or children specifically. Like I know I lost my granny there to cancer in January. And I know that other colleagues at the bar, you know, you have no idea what somebody's dealing with, you know, in terms of home life or care and responsibilities. And as a result of COVID and virtual working, like I would have went up to her house at lunchtime just to have lunch with her. And there was one day, you know, when she just wasn't quite on her deathbed, that she had called us and said, look, I've taken a real notion for a pasty supper.
A pasty supper.
And I was like, right, okay, give me 10 minutes, let me finish what I'm doing here. And we were able to go up and, you know, be part of that. And pre-COVID, that wouldn't have been possible because, you know, you would have been sitting at the back of a courtroom waiting to get on or waiting to finish a review. Whereas now, definitely the virtual system of working in SiteLink has provided opportunity to be more flexible and to prioritise moments like that really, when it comes down to it, that's what matters in life.
Really matters. That is fantastic. And thanks for sharing that. That's so lovely. Well, just, I mean, you've given us a real insight into your work and you've shared really great tips and advice. But what about somebody listening in today is interested in following in your career footsteps? What advice would you have for anybody?
So I had to take a few notes in this one as well. So the things that came to mind, the first thing, you have to believe in yourself. And it's not always easy at times. And I think as women, imposter syndrome can be a real challenge. And my friend actually sent me a book on that this week. Shout out to Leah, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. But even whenever I'm doing all these things, at times I think to myself, who am I? Like, why am I doing this? Should I be speaking out? Should I be doing this? But really, you know, magic things happen when you do. And it's only, I think in your head at times you think, oh, this is a major issue. It's a major issue for me to ask for this extended break. But really, when you have that confidence and believe in yourself, it's amazing what you can achieve whenever you do. I also had never take no for an answer. And there was an example on this when I was at Harvard. I really wanted to do this course called Making of a Politician because it was so popular and everybody wanted on it.
Making of a politician.
Yes. And I was like, well, being from Northern Ireland, I need to do this course. I need to know, what are we doing wrong over here? And it was very much computer says no at the start. They said the class is full, like there's no space, da-di-da-di-da. But I kept at the professor that was in charge of the course, and I was like, I need to do your course, I want your content. So I actually attended and just sat on the floor at the back, and I was like, look, I'm just here, like I've bought your materials, I want to hear this information. And eventually, a few people in the class dropped out, and I got an official place in the class and was able to participate. And part of the assessment was we had to run this political campaign. And the brief was, right, one of your classmates has to run as president, and you have to run it as if you're running for president, and then we will have a debate in the Kennedy Centre at Harvard at the end of it. And I was the campaign manager, and my my candidate won. And I cannot tell you how good that experience was. And that really showed me that if you have enough enthusiasm, drive and resilience, that really you can achieve what you want to achieve and do it very well.
Fantastic. So. Great advice. Well, just finally, and I know we touched on this a little bit, we're going back to our word activist here. And it's something that we just close every episode with our guests. And I mean, I love the way you've touched on the issue around, you know, making small changes and you didn't even realise that was, I suppose, in inverted commas, activism. But in general, what does it mean to you, that term? And also within the law, how can we use it and how can we, you know, campaign and do things outside of general practice to affect change, do you think?
And this was the question, Sarah, that I probably found the most challenging. And I think it came from being uncomfortable with the word itself and actually getting to grips with, well, what does that mean in reality? But I suppose when I thought about it, for me, I think it is remaining at the bar, remaining at the legal, profession and going through that and navigating motherhood on the side and being more open about it. And I don't think it's something that we should shy away from because, I mean, everybody has family, everybody has a life outside of the legal profession, and I think it's so important that people see the human side, that we're open and honest, maybe not always in LinkedIn, but even with, you know, amongst us as the legal profession, and being open with colleagues to say, oh, I'm having a really hard day, or I've been up half the night with a teething baby. And I think even culturally, having more openness about the challenges that we face as women can be really powerful, and it can allow people to see that I'm not super mum, that it's not all smooth, and some days it's hard. But I think that openness creates a real supportive working environment and makes navigating 3 under 3 with the bar a lot easier. 3 under 3, I still can't get my head around that. And all the work you're doing, oh my goodness. Well, Emma, I have wanted you on the show for such a long time, and I have to say you did not disappoint. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to having many more with you, I hope, and I hope to have you back on because it's just been so engaging and so insightful. Thank you so much for coming today. Well, thank you. And I think the core aim for us all as women with in the legal profession, and in line with the International Women's Day topic this week, is to make it easier for those coming behind us. And people have already started that, and the glass ceiling has already been smashed. It's great to see all these women at the top, but there's still a lot of work that remains to be done. Absolutely, and great to have you leading the way in many respects here. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.